picture is of everybody taking pictures of the glacier. That's what's interesting, isn't it? Was it exciting up there, huh?
Very exciting. Very cold, but very exciting.
And this is what we see out of our window now. And Dr. Steve was on the mic explaining the glacier, and I recorded it right here, and we're going to make something out of it. Probably merge what he has with the video that I took. I could still be out there, but I think it's fine. We got a lot, and it is very cold out there, so we're going to have breakfast, and we're going to listen to his presentation of it in the theater at 10 o'clock this morning.
Good morning, this is Dr. Steve speaking from the bridge. I will try to give some commentary on what we're looking at as we approach. The way I will do this is I will talk in segments. I will talk about a subject for a little bit, and then I will stop and give you time to think about that, and then I will come back on and talk about something else. So stay with me. Oh, and another thing, I have a talk on glaciers this morning at 10 a.m. in the theater. So to start with, most people like to look for wildlife, and in this particular instance, your best chance of seeing wildlife will be on the ice. So if you look right in front of the glacier, there is a lot of ice out there, and what you will most likely see are seals, harbor seals. They tend to be somewhat light colored, a grayish color with spots on them, and sometimes they have a little bit of brownishness to them. So what you need to do is look on the ice for something that's dark, and if you look closely, some of those will be seals. Sometimes you will also see them in the water. In that case, look for a wake, a V wake in the water where they're swimming. Sometimes we also see eagles sitting on the ice. So for wildlife today, your best bet is to look on the ice. Okay, now while we're still pretty far away, if you're on some of the upper decks, say 10 or above, and look at the glacier, you'll notice on the left there's a dark spot. It's almost black. Now, if you look up on top, you can see that there's a mountain there, and to the right you can see ice, and to the left you can see ice. To the left, to the right is the Hubbard Glacier coming down from around Mount Logan, and on the left is actually Valerie Glacier. And if you look up there toward where the rock, the island is between the two glaciers, you can see the black coming down. What happens is the Hubbard Glacier on the right is rubbing against the rock and getting dirt and black material off of that. And the Valerie Glacier on the other side is doing the same thing. And when those two glaciers come together, they push that rock and soil material together and make that black seam that you see down through there. That black seam is called a medial moraine, and you can see that, you know that two glaciers have come together to form that. Glaciers are said to advance, retreat, or be stable. Hubbard is considered a stable glacier in that fact that the face is pretty much stationary. So when you talk about advancing or retreating, advancing means that the face is moving forward, and retreating means that the face is moving backward. Now, that shouldn't be confused with how the glacier is actually moving. The glacier always forms at a higher altitude and moves downhill by the force of gravity. So in reality, the glacier is always moving forward. However, the face may not be moving forward. What happens is at the face of the glacier calves off. It breaks off and falls into the water. And so depending on how fast the glacier is moving down the mountain and how fast it's breaking off at the face determines whether the face is moving forward or moving backward or staying steady. So let's take an example. Let's consider the ice being formed at the top is produced so that it has a flow of 16 feet per day down the mountain. If the ice is being lost at the face at a rate of 6 feet per day, then the glacier is advancing at 10 feet per day. On the other hand, if ice is being formed at the top of the mountain at 16 feet per day, and the ice is being lost at the face by 20 feet per day, then the glacier is retreating at 4 feet per day. Ice is always formed at the top of the glacier at the highest elevations and then moves downhill with gravity. Again, Hubbard has actually sometimes called the Galloping Glacier because in the last 100 years it has on several occasions moved forward and then on several occasions then it's moved back. But the overall is stable in that it's about the same position that it was years ago. When we're near glaciers, one of the questions that most people want to know is, how old is that ice? Well, you have to differentiate when you talk about how old the glacier is and how old the ice is. The glacier is in here for thousands of years, okay? So right now we're in a warm stage, it's 10,000 years, well, closer to 12,000 years. And so this glacier was formed back during the last ice age. So we know for a fact that it's over 12,000 years old. However, the ice coming off is only about 400 to 500 years old. And the reason for that is the ice is only as old as how long it takes to get from the start of the glacier to the end of the glacier. Let me give you an example. The Mississippi River is thousands of years old. But the water entering the river at the head of the river, say Lake Itasca, Minnesota, takes only about 2 months to reach from the head of the river until it's dumped into the sea in New Orleans. Similarly, the Hubbard Glacier forms way back into Canada, about 75 miles inland. But it takes that ice about 400 to 500 years to get to the face of it here, where it breaks off and floats away. So the ice that you see in the water is 400 to 500 years old. This is the oldest ice in Alaska. Most of the glaciers in Alaska have ice that's only 100 years old or less, and that has to do with the fact that they move rapidly and they don't have a long ways to go. So the ice you see in the water is somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 years old, and is some of the oldest ice in Alaska. You've probably heard about the Ice Age. Well, that's not entirely true, because there wasn't an Ice Age. There have been multiple Ice Ages. During the last 800,000 years, there have been 8 periods of glaciation and then warming. It turns out about every 100,000 years, the Earth goes through a cycle where it is cold, or an ice age, for about 90,000 years, and then it warms up and is warm for about 10,000 years. And this has been going on for a very long time. This can be determined by looking at the ice cores in Antarctica, which the ice there is about 2 miles deep. And so they go back and they analyze the ice, and they can see that these ice ages occurred. So the ice ages and warm periods are just as regular to the Earth as are the seasons, and they're related a lot to the same thing, having to do with the orbital dynamics of the Earth going around the sun. Right now we're in the Holocene period, which is a warm period, and it has lasted about 11 to 12,000 years. Now think about it. The entire written history of the human race is all within that last warm period. So the warm period is good for us. The primary driving force for these cycles are the variation in the Earth's orbit. The interglacial periods, or the warm periods, tend to happen during times of more intense summer solar radiation to the northern hemisphere. The northern hemisphere contains about 67% of the land, and so when the land is facing the sun right, it warms up faster and causes the warm periods. There are variations during the interglacial periods, or the warm periods, and sometimes it actually gets cold for short periods of time. The last time this happened was during a period called the Little Ice Age, which occurred from 1300 to 1850. During that time, the Earth cooled slightly, and glaciers worldwide advanced. The ice coverage during the last ice age were about 8% of the Earth's surface, 5% of the Earth's land, and 33% of Alaska was covered with ice. Today, the ice coverage is about 3% of the Earth's surface, 11% of the Earth's land, and only about 5% of Alaska. Now I'd like to spend a little time talking about sea level variations. When we have an ice age, what happens is a lot of the water in the world evaporates and comes back as snow and then forms glaciers, and so you end up having a lot of the seawater tied up in ice that is land-based. As a consequence of the water coming out of the oceans, the sea level drops. Now hold on to your hats, because over geologic time, the variations are as much as 300 to 400 meters. That's 980 to 1,300 feet. That's how much the sea level has varied. during the last ice age, the sea level dropped about 130 meters, or about 427 feet. At the current rate of sea level rise, and as the ice melts, that causes the sea level to rise again. The current rate of sea level rise is about 3.7 millimeters per year, or about 0.146 inches per year. So, the fact that the sea level is rising is a natural part of the cycles from ice age to warm periods, also from a glacial age to an interglacial age. Currently, the ice content is as follows. Antarctica has enough ice in it to raise sea level about 70 meters, or 230 feet. Greenland has enough ice to raise the ocean about 7 meters, or about 23 feet. All other ice, land-based ice in the world, if it melted, would only raise sea level about 2 meters, or about 6.6 feet. Ice that is sea-based, such as the North Pole, does not change sea level at all if it melts. Only the land-based ice will raise sea level when it melts. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the water. If you look at the water, you can see that it has changed color from when we were out in the ocean. Now it is somewhat milky, whitish looking, and this is due to the glacier, the water coming from the glacier. As the glacier comes down the mountain, it just grinds the rocks and gravel underneath it into a very fine fat powder. This powder is called rock flour or glacial flour, and it mixes with the water and comes out and flows into the ocean out here, and that's what changes the color of the water to that very milky looking. It's just suspended sediment in the water. If you visited Mendenhall Glacier yesterday, you probably noticed, or not yesterday, day before yesterday, that the water coming off of Mendenhall Glacier was the same milky consistency. If you walked up to Nugget Falls, you'd notice that the water coming off Nugget Falls was very clear. It was not glacial water, it was rainwater. So right there where Nugget Falls flows into Mendenhall Lake, you can see what I call a seam where the two waters meet, and it's the glacial water with all the sediment meeting that clear water. And as we leave the Yakutat Bay today, you'll notice that this water will change color. It'll go from this very milky to more of a turquoise color, and then as we go back out into the ocean, it'll turn to the clear blue color. And that's all because of the sediment that is mixing with the water. That's the glacier here has ground the rocks into that very fine flour. Okay, now talk about calving. I'm sure some of you are interested in this. As glaciers that terminate in the water are called freshwater glaciers. If they're in freshwater or tidewater, if it's into the ocean, of course, Hubbard is a tidewater glacier. And the calving is a natural process. What happens is the glacier comes into the water. It's in the warmest environment that it has been in. Obviously, the water is above freezing, and so it will dissolve part of the glacier underneath it, and it causes the glacier to have an overhanging shelf. This shelf is stressed by the rising and falling of the tides and causes the ice to crack and eventually break off. And so Hubbard is known as a calving glacier, and sometimes it has very large chunks of ice. In fact, off to the right now, I see it just calved. There's a big splash off to the right on the right side. So Hubbard calves all the time, And if you're trying to see a calving, you'll hear occasionally some cracks that sounds like thunder, and that's the ice being stressed and cracking. And when you hear that, if you can locate it by the direction of the sound, you might be able to see it calve. Typically, the best way to look at that is to look for small pieces of ice falling. Lots of times, small pieces of ice will fall off before the big calving event occurs. So listen for cracks and sounds and look for little pieces of ice falling off, and that sometimes precedes the calving of a larger chunk of ice. There are classifications as to what the chunks of ice are called. An iceberg must be at least 16 feet above the water. And if it's not 16 feet, if it's between 16 feet and it's between 3 feet to 16 feet, it's called a bergy bit. If it's 3 feet or less, it's called a growler. Any of the tiny fragments are called brash ice. And another thing to realize is that when you see ice out there, only about 10% of the ice is above water. 90% of the ice is below the water line. Okay, now that we're getting close, I'll give you some specific information about Hubbard Glacier. Hubbard Glacier is the largest tidewater glacier in North America. And if you look at it right now, part of it consists of Valerie Glacier, which is everything to the left of the black streak in it. If you look further to your left, there's another glacier there, and that's Turner Glacier. The Hubbard Glacier originates in the largest non-polar ice field in the world. That ice field is located in both the United States and Canada in the Wrangell-St. Elias National Park and Preserve. It begins on the slopes of Mount Logan, which is the tallest mountain in Canada, and is about 75 miles away. So the glacier from where we're looking at the face back to the origin is about 75 miles long. The face that you're looking at right now from left to right, where it disappears behind that point, is about 5 miles across. There's another 2 miles or a little more behind that point where it curves around out of sight. The height of the glacier that you're looking at is about 350 feet above water and about 250 feet below water, and it's grounded, so it's not floating. It doesn't do the 90%, 10% rule of the floating ice. Occasionally, in the past, Hubbard Glacier has approached and pushed up against the point on the right, which is called Gilbert Point. And when it pushes up against there, it cuts off the water in the Russell Fjord behind it. And the water level rises in the Russell Fjord until it gets enough pressure to break the ice down. And this has happened twice in the past. In one case, the amount of water behind it was significant. It was considered the biggest ice dam break in history. And so it was something similar that happened in Juneau, where all the water came flowing down and flooded the river. But this has happened twice in the near past. And one thing to consider is only 700 years ago, Hubbard Glacier covered all of Yakutat Bay, so all the way back out to the ocean. Okay, with this, I think I'm going to sign off, and I will probably go out on the bow and look at it from there. So have a good day and enjoy the viewing of the glacier.